Podcast where no topics are off limits. If you or I or Jason were able to learn even one thing today, then I think we've accomplished our mission. So, before we begin, Jason, what is new with you?
Well, I took the weekend and I got out of Dodge. Came up to visit the parents. They have a nice little quiet place on the water side in northern New Brunswick. And it's a lot nicer waking up in the morning and seeing trees and hills and an open bay versus a cityscape.
Yeah,
So a
nice,
nice
nice.
little time to visit the parents, get some good family time in, make the most of that while we can, and just take a bit of a rest.
Nice, nice.
But
Make it a
also
long
working
weekend.
away at this and a few other little projects.
Right on.
How about you?
We're going sledding today, so yeah, uh, nice childhood activity. So we're
Yeah, you can get competitive with the 8-year-olds there, try to get down the hill first.
yeah, exactly. I got a fresh new saucer, so
Ooh.
yeah. Plus, hey, weight's the not that we're big guys, but against an 8-year-old, weight crushes the downhill speed. So
That it does. You still have an old jet ski there? Or a three ski, I mean?
Jets, yeah, no, I don't actually. You know what? We never had a three ski. We always had we were the classic toboggan family.
That's true.
Yeah, you had one though.
Man, those things are dangerous and a lot of fun. I
The jet
remember
skis, yeah.
the three skis. I
Sorry,
remember
now you're making me call them jet skis.
I remember one time, geez, we must have been 11 or 12 years old. It was me and a few other my school chums, and we're going down the hill where the village was, right? Where the seniors'
Yep,
home right there.
yep,
And it's a great big steep hill. And at the bottom of the steep hill is a parking lot. But the hill ends very abruptly, so there's no good way to slow down and stop before you get into the parking lot. And us being the intelligent kids that we were, we decided to put a jump right at the bottom of it too.
yep.
One of the buddies went down, hit that with the three ski. The three ski landed right in the box of a truck with him still in it. The alarm of the truck went off. We all took off running, except for one friend who was the real trooper, jumped into the box of the truck, got the three ski, and then just hoofed it with the rest of us.
Nice.
I'll tell you who it was there after we stopped recording.
Sounds good. Sounds like a movie. Could be a
Oh
could be a
man,
movie.
all of our faces were just like, every man for himself, run! We just all bolted to our homes.
I remember when that happened when we were kids and we were throwing snowballs in the playground at school, and after we were told like for weeks and weeks not to throw snowballs anymore, and a few of us were, including you and myself, and we saw the teacher run over, and you just ran away, and I got caught,
I was a
and I
very,
never ratted you out.
I was a very fearful child.
Yeah, never ratted you out. So
No,
yeah,
that's true. You got my back
still
on
owe
that
me.
one.
So today we're gonna teach everyone how to argue better. So we're gonna talk about logical fallacies, or actually we're gonna teach people how not to argue,
Aren't we smart? Look at us.
or how to decipher bad arguments when having a discussion with someone. So we made a list of it's not exhaustive, but it is a list of several logical fallacies that people often make uh, during a debate or discussion or argument they have with friends and family members. So we're just going to kind of go through the list, help people uh, recognize when themselves or someone else uh, uses a logical fallacies in their while they're having a discussion or trying to make points. So Jason, I'll let you lead this one, and let's start off with the first logical fallacy. And what we'll do is for every logical fallacy, we'll also try to give people examples as well.
Yeah, and before we start down the list, I mean, we all fall prey to this, right? I do it all the time. I'm sure you do too. As you're not always an expert in the subject matter. Sometimes you don't have the energy or the mental bandwidth to go and form a good, proper, long, exhaustive thought. And somebody will just see something and you'll make a quick judgment, and you'll work with that.
Yeah, I think there's two key things here: is logic. These logical fallacies, or recognizing these logical fallacies. First of all, um, the whole saying "facts don't care about your feelings." That's truly what recognizing these logical fallacies will do. Because oftentimes during while we argument, we find ourselves without even noticing turning into an emotional argument. Whereas these logical fallacies will really try to make you recognize, hey, don't don't veer into the emotive part of it. Try to stay logical, factual, and try to make sense.
Stick to the nuts and bolts. And I find like an easy way to identify a logical fallacy being used is you'll kind of get that little twinge where you're like, wait, what did that person say? Or what did I say? Like, it seems like some steps were skipped. You don't really know how or why, but it just seems like a weird leap from A to B, and there's something missing in between. I find that's often the little warning sign that there's been a fallacy put in there somehow.
Yeah, yeah. So hopefully this will help you kind of recognize when that does in fact happen. The other thing too is I think we all do it when we get into a discussion that we weren't necessarily expecting, right? Not ready for, and then you find yourself like, hey, I actually don't know that much about this topic, or I definitely jumped from A to C instead of A to B. Maybe I should take a step back and maybe not even try and have this argument because I'm clearly not equipped enough.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a good way to keep yourself accountable and just know, or being able to recognize if someone's kind of pulling a quick one on you too. So I'll start with the first one.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Speaking of toboggans,
I see what you did here. The first one is the slippery slope. Well played. So this one here, it's a conclusion based on the premise that if A happens, then eventually through a series of small steps, B, C is going to happen, and eventually so will X, Y, and Z. So you're equating A to Z without B through Y happening, or necessarily that they will happen. Now, you kind of think of a decision tree here. It is very possible that things go A, B, C, and then all the way through to X, Y, Z, but it doesn't mean that it's going to happen that way.
right,
So, an example of that is if we ban Hummers because they're bad for the environment, then eventually the government is also going to ban all cars. So, we should not ban Hummers. So, you're thinking
right,
just because you're banning one vehicle means that eventually you're going to slide down the slope of banning all vehicles.
right. I tried to quickly identify a positive example here, or a way in which it's not necessarily a fallacy, and that's my example is banning certain speech or implementing compelled speech laws is indeed a slippery slope to the erosion of freedom of speech and thought. Now, you can have countless arguments with lots of people, and I have before, but this is an example where I think we have some pretty good data to back up that it is in fact a slippery slope and has happened in the past and is currently happening.
And with that one there, I don't think we're at A or B. I think we're somewheres in LMNOP at this point, and we're like, look, we have a longitudinal data set of language softening and rewriting the definitions of words to to fit better the narrative of the progressing culture towards whatever the ideal is thought to be today.
Right.
And one that I noticed recently was herd immunity. When we were a kid, herd immunity was either when the majority of a population has either been inoculated through catching a disease or through vaccination. But either way, whether you caught the disease and recovered or were vaccinated, you still have the antibodies, therefore you're immune, or at least thought to be of a certain disease. But recently, with the beer bug epidemic, the definition of herd immunity was changed to only inoculated. So herd immunity no longer means having caught the disease or being immunized. It only means immunized.
Right.
So
So yeah,
that
you're giving the example of the language change there.
exactly.
Yeah, they have done the same thing with pandemic, by the way. I forget the exact year, but I think it was the early 2000s, and they met in Germany and they talked about all of the um, they all got together and they talked about the definition of pandemic, and they actually changed it for it to be much smaller than it used to be eligible to be called a pandemic.
So now all of a sudden, if you want to flip that switch, the bar to be able to do so is much lower. Okay, so the next one, or is there anything you want to add to slippery slope?
No, that's good. Let's go to the second one.
All right, so we have a hasty generalization. This is a conclusion based on insufficient or biased evidence. In other words, you are rushing to conclusion before you have all the relevant facts. So that one's pretty straightforward. You just jump to a conclusion. So, an example of that, though, even though it's only the first day, I can tell this is going to be a boring course. So,
Right.
judging a book by its cover, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
we see this one a lot. I mean, we all fall prey to it. And I would say the positive aspect of this is what do you call a heuristic? So it's taking something very simple and making a generalization when you don't have time to go and dig deeper into it.
Right. And
So
it's ingrained in our survival too. That's how we
exactly
evolved, right? Is to truly judge a book by its cover very fast in order for us to survive.
right. You're the size of a shrew. You see a snake, you're going to get out of there.
Yeah, unless you're a honey badger, then you take that that
Right.
guy down.
And like today would be, say, you're walking down a dark alley, and on one side of the alley, there's three hooded figures, and on the other side of the alley, there's grandma. Well,
Right.
which side are you going to choose to walk on?
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious, and you can call it stereotyping all you want. That's stereotyping that has allowed people to survive throughout history. So it's I'd say that's the positive example or constructive example of hasty generalization of judging a book by its cover.
Yeah. So obviously, you could see where it could be a negative, but it also has its uses too.
Right.
So the next one, we'll dust off the old Latin textbooks here. Post hoc ergo propter hoc. It's a conclusion that if A occurs after B, then B must have caused A. So if you drink a bottle of water and you get sick, it must have been that the water was tainted. Maybe it was something that you ate. Maybe it was that you didn't wash your hands and touched your face. It could be a million other things, but you quickly associate the outcome from one of many possible incomes.
Right. They think
Yeah, no,
correlation equals
exactly.
causation.
And well, another one we had here is children who play a lot of video games are more violent. Therefore, video games are bad and make children violent.
You remember when we were a lot younger and video games kind of blew up? That was a big thing, eh? I don't know if you remember, but that was a big talking point in the news and by certain politicians, but mainly the mainstream media was pushing that a lot, saying that, all of these shooting games and video games in general made kids, especially young boys, a lot more prone to violence and all of these things. And throughout the years, they did studies, and at least the ones I read and listened to, turns out there was no correlation. There's no increase in boys'
You can go
aggressive
even further than
behavior.
that. They said the same thing about the Bugs Bunny cartoons when he's dropping anvils on Elmer Fudd and Roadrunner versus Wile E. Coyote. They said it encouraged violent behavior.
Yeah,
Well, did it? Probably not.
especially when that stuff's pretty fantastical, right? It's like it takes them like 6 seconds to realize they're off a
I was
cliff,
about to say,
and then they can run in the air before they fall.
gravity only applies after you realize there's nothing under your feet.
Yeah, it's like when toddlers are running and they fall down, and then they look around to see if anyone's paying attention for them to cry or not.
Stop being such a drama queen.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so next one. Kind of a similar idea. This one is the genetic fallacy. It's the conclusion that is based on an argument that the origin of a person, idea, institute, or theory determines its character, nature, or worth. So you're basically saying where the thing comes from, therefore it has value or not. So an example of
Right.
that would be the Volkswagen Beetle is an evil car because it was originally designed by Hitler's army. So Hitler's army
Or
bad, therefore Beetle bad. Well,
right.
is
Or you could be even more direct and just say, I don't like Germans because Nazis existed.
exactly right.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I didn't even need to go into that one. That one's pretty obvious. It's a no bueno.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a pretty straightforward one.
Yeah. Here's one you're gonna like. No true Scotsman is one's belief is rendered infallible because no matter how compelling the evidence is, one simply shifts the goalposts so that it wouldn't apply to a supposedly true example. All men eat meat, but I don't eat meat. Therefore, I'm not a real man.
Right. You say only true men eat meat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's never a true version of what you're espousing. And I
Right.
think
Yeah. that one is very similar, pretty much identical to what you would also say as moving the goalposts. And that's you and I have an argument, and you ask a question, or you make a case for an argument, and I disprove or prove your argument. So I give you valid arguments to defeat your idea, and then what you do is just simply either shift the goalposts or add another argument, right?
Yeah.
Say, but no, that's not what I meant. What about this? And then you're like, okay, here you go, debunked that. But what about this? So that could be very, very similar to the no true Scotsman.
Yeah, there's no end to that road. No matter how much evidence you present, it's never good enough because the next thing and the next thing. I
Right.
think another manifestation that we see of that is cancel culture today. The left is very rapidly accelerating to a totalitarian left ideology, and you're never woke enough. Like, it doesn't matter
Right.
how liberal, how pro, all their things you are. If all of a sudden they move beyond your idea, then you must be canceled and must be removed. And
Right.
there's numerous examples of this in today's culture. And I think one of the positives of that is people are starting to wake up. So I'm cautiously optimistic that some people are starting to understand that when you cancel people like Gina Carano, that okay, you're a
Right.
little far down that road.
Or J.K.
Or
Rowling.
J.K. Rowling, exactly. They're
Yeah.
people that are most likely liberals, or big L liberals,
Yeah.
are being canceled because they don't fit into the ever-changing goalpost.
Yeah. And the big thing I would say with that, or like the scary part of that, is the inconsistency of it, right?
Right.
That's the whole inconsistency of those arguments makes for a very scary, uh, I don't know, it sets a scary
Well, you,
precedent.
you can't build a society off of it because you have nothing stable to go off of. If your rules, your values, your norms are ever changing based on
Right.
nothing really, then how can you build off of that? Your foundation is weak from the get go. All right, and the next one is begging the claim. So this one here is the conclusion that the writer is looking to prove is validated within the claim itself. An example would be filthy and polluting coal should be banned. Well, is coal truly filthy and polluting? But either way, you're just adding those adjectives onto it to make your own argument.
Right. This is where you could say, this becomes a very emotional argument, right? You're Before you even make the argument, you're loading it with very subjective arguments, or wording, or adjectives. So another example is, during Trump's campaign, to discredit Hillary Clinton, he'd call her Crooked Hillary, and that just became her nickname, right? So that comes with a lot of prejudgment, and it's obvious to the audience, or to whoever you're making the argument, or presenting your speech to, that we already know how you feel subjectively about this person.
Which was a very poignant and a good political move. And whether it's true or not, which, let's be real, most likely is, was still a logical fallacy.
Right.
All
Right.
right, so the next one's kind of similar. It's a circular argument. This restates the argument rather than actually proving it. So George Bush is a good communicator because he speaks effectively. Well, you can put whoever's name you want in there. You're not making an argument.
Jason is tall because he is 6'3".
But actually, that's proving it because
Sure.
you're actually giving it an objective measurement here.
You're right.
Jason is tall because he's not short.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true.
So, I find a circular argument is usually when you've run out of things to say, or you really haven't thought your idea through and you have a feeling that's what it is, but you don't really know how to enunciate it or really dig deeper. You haven't done the work to fully flesh out your idea, and you think that's what it is, but you're not there yet.
Yeah. It's kind of like you've started half a sentence, but you don't know where to end it. So you're just like, so yeah.
I just hate
Right.
when you start a sentence and you don't you don't know where it's going, then all of a sudden potato.
It's like Michael Scott. He has I forget what it is, but he has an expression about that. He's like, sometimes I just start a sentence and I don't know where I'm going.
And that just keeps rambling on and on and
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, but funny you picked the George Bush argument because on top of that, you could say it's just wrong because he's not a very good communicator.
Exactly. So it's
So
like,
my fallacy would be George Bush is not a good communicator because he does not speak effectively.
which would almost be provable as well.
Yeah,
Please,
you can back it up with tape.
please don't make me do stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so here's another pretty straightforward one. Either or. It's a conclusion that oversimplifies the argument by reducing it to only two sides or choices. We can either stop using cars or destroy the earth.
Right.
Well, that's an oversimplification to say the least.
Right.
But it's okay, if we don't do A, then B. It's kind of the way you speak to a child a little bit to make them start to make them understand consequences and
Hmm.
differentiating thought. But you're speaking at the level of a 2 year old here. You're not
Yeah.
speaking to adults.
There's no room for nuance at all,
Exactly.
and it's a false dilemma, you could say as well.
Right. And I mean, we've hear this one a lot with climate change, right? So uh, I'll be honest, I haven't looked enough into climate change to have a really strong opinion either way. Is the climate changing? Yeah, it is. The summers are hotter, winters are not as cold as they used to be. Is it man made or is it just cycles of the planet? Or is it a bit of both? I don't know. So I'm not going to go, take a camp on that one. But what I think is an either or is saying that if we don't completely revamp and remodel our economy, the world's going to end in 12 years. That
Right.
seems like a pretty exaggerated claim of an either or.
Which can become dangerous, right? Then those arguments are not only fallacies, but some can make for pretty dramatic policy making or things like that. So it's always important to see the nuance and talk about what's in the middle and what all weigh out all the options.
It's one of those, like at the start of the talk, I was talking about that little like twinge you feel when someone uses a logical fallacy. Well, this one here really feels like an overt manipulation that
Right.
you're either with me or you're against me. And if you want to debate and have a discussion, therefore you're against me, so you're bad, you're
Yeah.
wrong.
It's like that more and more with just politics in general, and I'll take the example of a very topical debate here, and that's like pro-life and pro-choice, right? The abortion topic, and this one fits really well in the either or fallacy. Is for the pro-lifers, it's basically like you're murdering babies. That's it, right? You
Yeah,
don't care about murder,
full stop.
and full stop. And then you've got some people on the pro-choice camp who are like, you don't care about women's rights, and that's it, right? So it's basically like if you have any nuance in this, you don't care about women, and on the other side, it's if you have any nuance about this, you don't care about dead babies.
Right. The battle lines are very clearly drawn, and there's no way to bridge that gap.
Right. Which makes for very unproductive discussions or policy changes or anything like that.
Right, and you're little more than turd flinging monkeys at that point.
Sure.
Okay.
The next one is one of the most popular ones. So I'll let you I'll let you talk about this one. Give an example of it as a fallacy, and then I'll try to make the argument for it when it is used semi correctly, maybe. But yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So ad hominem. That's one you hear it a million times, but you never really know what it means unless you've been to law school. Like when I was doing the research for this one, I was like, I've heard this. I kind of think I know what it means, but I'm not sure. So the definition of this one, it's an attack on a person's character rather than their opinions or their arguments. And we see this all the time, right? The example here that's not so topical anymore, but still gets the point across is Greenpeace's strategies aren't effective because they're all a bunch of dirty, lazy hippies.
Yeah.
So, to remove the initiatives that Greenpeace is doing, but you're saying that they're ineffective because they're dirty, lazy hippies. So you're attacking their character instead of
Hmm.
either their point of view, their arguments, or their methodology.
Right. It's like, yeah, if you're having a conversation with a friend or someone today, and it's they instead of fighting you on the statements you've given, they'll call you stupid or they think you're evil or things like that. That is an ad hominem. It is purely replacing the argument with a personal insult or jab. Now, I try to create a positive example or an example where an ad hominem can be almost used, uh, not necessarily saying that. it's good to insult or make fun of people during an argument, but just maybe attacking or pointing out someone's character flaws to maybe justify the argument you're making. So I've written one here, and it's in the context of COVID. Many politicians who have openly and in some cases forcefully enforced lockdowns for the general population have disregarded their own orders and have traveled to tropical destinations during the holidays. In this case, the attacking of someone's character can be valid as it can A, question the integrity of a lawmaker, or B, question the severity of the virus, seeing that many have ignored the rules for pleasure.
Right. And what happens here is you have a person in power who's instilling certain laws or policy, but the ad hominem is correct in a certain sense because it's underlying the hypocrisy of the person. So it's a person who refuses or at least fails to lead by example. And if you are
Right.
to impose such wide sweeping and authoritarian measures, you best believe in them, or else it undermines the entire thing.
Exactly. So I think that's an example where it's at least worthwhile, especially if the argument affects you directly, like a bill or a law. Then I think it's important to look at who, what kind of people are implementing and enforcing these laws.
Yeah, I agree on that one. And it's not to say that you should always do that. It's just an instance of where at least holding up the mirror to a lawmaker is very valid and very obvious to would be the thing to do.
Mhm.
So the next one is ad populum, or otherwise known as the bandwagon appeal. It's an appeal that presents what most people or a group of people think in order to persuade to think the same way. Getting on the bandwagon in one such instance is an ad populum appeal. I mean, one thing that recently happened here was the GameStop debacle,
Right.
getting everyone to pile in, to pile in, to pile in, and getting that momentum for to create the short squeeze that we talked about on our first episode that we
Yeah.
launched. And that's perfect bandwagon, right? We also see with COVID now where um, neighbors are looking at neighbors to make sure that neighbor is following the prescribed guidelines, where you're starting to see social pressure on other people who think differently, which is also a bit of an either or, right? It's either you're all down for the measures or you're not. And
Yeah.
where's the nuance in there?
Yeah. You could, I'm thinking of another example too, is you could have a boy who likes playing with dolls, right? For example. And then the parent or whoever wants them to play with trucks, they say, son, like all boys play with trucks, right? That would be a bandwagon appeal, saying like typically people like you like to play with trucks, so don't play with dolls.
Well, I think in that case, there you would need more people. It wouldn't come from a position of power. It wouldn't come from a parent. It would come from that kid being at the daycare, and all of his peers, all of his male friends are playing with trucks instead of dolls. So then he follows along
Right,
with the group.
right. But the argument in this sense would also be made verbally during an argument, right? Saying like all Americans do this or all boys do this. I
Hmm.
could I could use that during an argument, and it may or may not be applied as a fallacy,
Oh, okay, okay, I
right?
see what you mean.
Because not all Americans are the same. Not all boys are the same.
You're implying the bandwagon without actually
Correct.
being part of the bandwagon. Okay, so it's
Correct.
a like a different level of it,
Yeah, it's just part of making the argument verbally.
right? Okay, so here's another one that you hear a lot. It's a red herring. And what a red herring is, it's a diversionary tactic that avoids the key issue, often by opposing arguments rather than addressing them. So, an example of that would be the level of mercury in seafood may be unsafe, but if we ban fishing, what will happen to the fishermen's ability to provide for their families?
Right. So
So,
yeah,
you
you
start
basically switch arguments completely.
exactly, you start by talking about food safety, and then you end up on economic prosperity. Well, that's two separate issues. Let's address one thing at a time.
Yeah. Whereas they both could be valid, but you got to get to, you know, the second point by not jumping.
And that's one thing I find that we're really bad for these days. It's making everything a single, like boiling everything down to a single issue. So if you just take this example here, well, we're talking about food safety, we're talking about incomes, we're talking about livelihoods, we're talking about families. If you just made that problem about only food safety or only economics or only viability of a community, well, you would be doing the discussion a disservice. So not only is a red herring counterproductive and unproductive, if you focus too much on just one thing, then you're not really getting the full color and the full nuance of the actual problem, which is
Right.
a different thing, but it's just something that came to mind here.
Right. But it is important when you're having discussions with people not to jump to conclusions using red herrings to discredit the friend you're having the discussion with, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those like you're trying to make a point, and then I say, yeah, well, what about that? And it
Hmm.
throws you off the scent, a red herring. It throws you
Yeah.
off the scent of the trail you were on, but it's not really doing anything. You're just
Yeah.
diverting from the point that was trying to be made.
That to me is one of them where you get that odd feeling if you're having an argument or a discussion with someone and they use a red herring. To me, it's that weird feeling like, whoa, how do we get here? Like, this is not what I'm talking about. This doesn't feel right.
Yeah, and I think that's the way to go about it. Is when you get that odd little twinge, you're like, something weird happened here.
Yeah.
Do you want to move to the next one?
Sure. The one of the most popular ones.
The straw man. This move oversimplifies an opponent's point of view and then attacks a hollow argument. People who don't support the proposed minimum wage hate the poor.
Right.
So just because you're, and we did an episode on the minimum wage. Go
Right.
take a listen. And
Just last week.
we tried to make arguments for and against, but we kind of kept coming back to the against just because of the data that we were uncovering and presenting. So, William, do you hate the poor?
No, I do not.
Do you think they are awful people who the plebs should be the serving class?
No, I do not.
Well, but you do not support a minimum wage, William. You must hate the poor.
You got me. You got me.
So you see that, you see how it works, right?
Yeah.
It makes no sense, and you see this all the time in political discourse where someone's trying to make a point, and it's like, oh well, you must hate X, and it's kind
Yeah,
of like
it could be a Second Amendment agreement, and then the other person says, "Oh, so I guess you're okay with school shootings." And
perfect,
it's like,
perfect
right?
example. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that I should be able to. I have the right to bear arms. Oh, so you want kids to die? What?
Yeah. 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 We saw that great skit with Piers Morgan and Ben Shapiro. I don't know if you've ever seen that one. This was years ago after Sandy Hook,
No, I didn't.
and Ben Shapiro goes on Piers Morgan's show, and basically right away before Piers Morgan can say anything, he's like, "I know what you do. You basically stand on the graves of the Sandy Hook children to basically destroy anyone's argument or will to argue for the Second Amendment or for any form of gun ownership." And basically, he shut him up right away. He's like, "Yeah," he's basically like, "I'm taking away your fallacy, your logical fallacy, before you can even say anything." Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's someone who very much understands the dynamic and what's most likely the playbook of the opponent, and who's a master at the art of debate.
Yeah. End of all logical fallacies.
Yeah, Mr. Spock level over
Yeah.
9,000 there.
Yep.
All right, so the next one is moral equivalence. And a moral equivalence is a fallacy that compares a minor misdeed with major atrocities, suggesting that both are equally immoral.
Hmm.
That
I,
parking. Go for it.
if only we had contemporary examples of these.
Oh man, I no.
Yeah.
The parking attendant who gave me a ticket is as bad as Hitler. Man, and just as a side, I'm so tired of all the references to everything being Nazi and everything being
Yeah.
a World War II reference. It's so overdone and a false moral equivalence. Like,
Yep.
eh, take it. I know you got a bunch for this one.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, just, Trump's Hitler, Trump's this, Trump's that, you're right. Every single action that is, at least where you try to make the argument for it to be a negative, you compare it to the Nazi regime or to Hitler or to Hitlerian ideals or things like that.
It's the first time I hear Hitlerian. That's a
Yeah.
new one.
To which it's kind of like, yeah, you're kind of, for the most, depending on what logic you're using here, for the most part, you're downplaying what happened in World War II and during the Holocaust. And oftentimes, yeah, it's false moral equivalence. It's just not the same thing at all. It's not the same situation. It's not nearly as bad or as dire. Um,
And
so
it's
yeah,
just another way to shut
just
down the
so
speech of the
lazy.
person. Exactly. It's lazy. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it goes into the straw man, where you're just kind of trying to make them. You're jumping to a conclusion that makes them look bad. If you're like, okay, well, if I argue anymore, you just compared what I'm arguing for to Hitler. So cool, right?
Yeah. Yeah. They go together very well. And you can see how they'd be used in tandem.
Yeah,
One of the last ones we have here is the apex fallacy. And what the apex fallacy is, it's when you take a group and judge the group only by its top performers. Um, so an example of that would be the very best runners are Kenyans. These runners represent Kenya. All Kenyans are good runners. Well, it's a logical fallacy because I have a background in track and field, and yes, a lot of the world's best distance runners are Kenyans, but it's not that the entire country is made up of world class distance runners. Even in Kenya itself, it's only a certain tribe in a certain area that produces the vast majority of these world
mm,
class runners. So even within Kenya, they're like, no, 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 we're not all a bunch of great runners. It's the group over there. But
right,
even in the group over there, it's like, okay, yeah, like we have a culture of running and a lot of people are good. But here's the five guys that are actually really, really good on the world stage.
right,
So you're taking you're looking only at the summit of the mountain and thinking the entire mountain is just like that same summit.
right. Yeah, I think it does it can be used correctly. I get it, to make a quick argument of like, on average, these people are like this, or on average, Scandinavians are taller, blah blah blah.
Hang on,
But
can I interject real quick?
yeah,
The problem with the average is that an average is always sensitive to the extremes, right?
absolutely,
So let's say we're looking at income. Well, the average income of these people is higher than the average income of this group. Well, is it the entire group or is it just the few at the top that
fine,
bring up the average?
fine. The median.
Sorry, that's the stats nerd in me. I just had to point that
Yeah,
one out.
seriously, I'm gonna give you a fallacy for being
Two.
too pedantic.
Oh, that's a big word. I don't even know what that one means. You're the word guy. I'm the number guy.
There you go. Look it up. You're being pedantic, Jason. The
Uh,
median. You know what I mean.
bad me.
So, basically all that to say, you can use it as a median or an average argument, and just to make a quick argument, right? Often it's just to set up an argument, you'll use a median argument, and that totally makes sense. Um, but it can often be used as a fallacy in the way you mentioned it. But also, what I find it can often do is discredit the hard work or the effort behind the success of the argument, right? So for instance, like talking about another good example is like all Canadians are good hockey players, right? Well, a lot of Canadians don't even know how to skate or skate very well. To be good at hockey, you have to practice hockey a lot.
Man, you know why I don't like the dictionary?
Why?
So I just Googled pedantic, and the
Oh,
dictionary definition is of or like a pedant. Well, if I don't know what pedantic means, I don't know what a pedant is. I could do the extension if I knew what the root word meant. Many of the essays are long, dense, and too pedantic to. Okay, great. Can I have it in a sentence, please? Like, you're not helping me here.
cool. So did you find the definition?
Oh, wait, hang
You
on.
got nowhere,
I
Jason. You
got
got nowhere.
absolutely nowhere with a pedant. A person who is excessively concerned with formalism, accuracy, or precision. All right, you got me on that one. Oh,
There you go.
there was a point for you.
There, I out pedanticized you.
And I think I've pedanticized myself by going and looking at the definition. So
There you go.
we both win.
Anyways, as I was saying, to end this argument, is often that argument too, because it's a generalization, it often takes away any of the kind of hard work or details that go behind that argument, right? Like you're not just born a marathon champion. There's a lot of friggin' blood, sweat, and tears that goes into becoming. You could be genetically predisposed to be better at certain things. I mean, if you're an NBA player, odds are you're over 6'2", that's for sure. But and it helps if you're 7'2". but there's still a lot of hard work that goes into that, and it should always be part of the argument or the story you're trying to paint.
Right. And I mean, you can think of a bunch of examples too. There's, certain groups are privileged because they hold all the wealth. Well, it's all of like
Oh, really?
it's all of 6 people. Wow. So that
Right,
means we have to modify our entire hiring practices because a few people are rich. Okay.
right, yeah. Or like, all men are bad because of this, or or whenever a man opens his mouth, he mansplains. And you're
Exactly.
like, well, maybe he's just actually saying something.
Look at you mansplaining what mansplaining is, you
Yeah.
mansplainer.
I guess I mansplained pedanticism to you,
No, actually, you
even
did.
if that's just
No,
a
you
word.
did. I looked it up myself. Thank you very much.
That's true. I use it correctly.
You did. All right, buddy. Is there anything else you want to add on this one or wrap it up here?
Yeah, I think this is a good place to wrap it up. I think we equipped you guys and ourselves with a nice refresh of what logical fallacies you should and shouldn't be making in your next discussion or argument you have with family and friends. But remember, keep it classy. I'd also say the best way to approach a debate or discussion is to do it one on one with someone, especially if you clearly disagree. It always gets really difficult to have a disagreement with many people. Then you really get the bandwagon appeal real time, and it makes it difficult to have uh, a more passive and gentle and less and a conversation with less fallacies in them.
Unless you really know what you're talking about and you can set up a flip open table on a university campus and put a Bristol board on it that says change my mind and then go to town.
Yeah, change my mind. Yeah, yeah, or yeah, then you turn into like the gangster memes.
That's good stuff. All right, buddy, let's close it up there. Thank you,
All
everyone,
right.
for listening. We hope you learned something. We certainly stretched our gray matter on this one, and this was another episode of Thought Crimes. So thank you very much, and cheers.
Yeah, and you can find us on locals.com. Follow us on our community there. And you can find our podcasts pretty much where podcasts are found. So Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So cheers, everyone. Talk to you later.